Hi, I'm Ajit Lenin. Welcome to the Enterprise Architecture video series, part 11. We are looking at the 6-layer framework I introduced for establishing enterprise architecture practices. And last few weeks, we've been looking at the architecture domains layer and specifically on the business architecture. Right. And last few weeks, we looked at the various aspects of the business architecture, like business service, processes, function, capability. Indeed, last week, we looked at business entities. Now, this week, we'll spend some time on the business events and the feedback aspects. Okay, just to start with business events, let's define what is a business event, right? So business event is any external or internally triggered event that is of interest to a business process, either initiates or impacts a business process. So it can either initiate a process, the whole process as such, or it can initiate a sub-process, right? So it can be created by an external agent like an actor or internal components like another business process or business entities. Events can be as simple as just a click on the screen or accessing a URL, etc. Or it could be an API call or a message through a message queue, etc. So it could be any mechanism. Identifying the business events is a key aspect on defining the business architecture, right? So key towards basically if we can able to identify the external and the events of real significance, we should be able to identify the business processes impacted by it or initiated by it, right? So identifying the business events is a key aspect of developing the business architecture. And events are the key mechanism for communications across business processes and business segments, right? So this is a key aspect. So what is the continuity between business processes across business units, right? Those are established through the events that are generated from the business processes. So business processes or events can be created by business process, business entities, or by actors, external or internal actors, and event can trigger a notification, which basically reaches the respective, whoever is to that notification, the respective interested business processes can listen into and get initiated by itself, right? Moving further down, these are key characteristics of business events. So business events we looked defined as a real-time events that can trigger a business process or a sub-process. So something like say submitting an order or a code, generating a code, bill generation is an automated event that can happen, right? Business events can be created by an actor, internal or external actor, and can be manual or automatic, right? And business event can be created by a status or a state change of a business process. So a business process which goes through status changes should generate an event, right? So status changes, which are basically when a business process moves from one status to another status, for example, an order submission or a sales process, right? So an order submission, submitted status to order ready for fulfillment to completed, whatever may be the status we define for the process. Any status change should trigger an event. And within the status, any state changes also could trigger an event based on what we feel is significant. Right. Similarly, any state change for a business entity should trigger an event. So for suppose an order moves from open status to assigned status, right? That should trigger an event. So business by entity by itself on status change state change can trigger an event, or business processes, right? We should make sure the events that triggered by business entity and business process, there could be some overlap between them, but we should make sure that there is no duplication of actions taken on those business events, right? Business events can trigger notification. We looked at that. And also business events should have a unique identifier and should be recorded against a specific time, right? Now let's look at on the feedback, right? So that's what is the feedback? So feedback is basically any kind of communication going back to either to an initiator of a business process, or in the case of business functions, to the actor who performs the business function, right? So the feedback would be a simple confirmation that is going back to the initiator of a process, or any kind of updates we want to give back to the initiator, right? Feedbacks can be through any different channels. So we'll look at what are the typical channels with the feedbacks can happen. On a business function perspective, a anytime a business function is completed, there should be a feedback should go to the actor who is performing the business function, or it could be optional when an intermediate change happens within the intermediate steps in between the function, right? So, but it is mandatory, I believe, to have a feedback go to the actor who performs the function when the function is completed. It is optional to generate an feedback within the function when the individual steps is completed, right? So moving further down, these are the different. We'll look at some of the channels of feedback. So it could be real-time feedbacks. This real-time feedback could be API responses. So if an API call function is a business function is realized through an API, the response of the API itself could be the feedback, right? It could be, say, if you are creating a ticket through an API, the ticket number comes back in the API response, right? It could be on-screen confirmations when a person is actually performing the function using a UI, right? It could be web UI or app or anything. The screen confirmation could be a feedback to them. So when somebody creates a ticket, the ticket number comes back. A bank employee, another example is a bank employee filling out a form. The employee gets a feedback as a confirmation screen comes back, right? Or it could be somebody calling an IVR. So an IVR can give a real-time feedback back. Or it could be asynchronous feedback. So typical way asynchronous feedback happens is through emails, right? Or SMS or any other. Nowadays, we have other messaging platforms like WhatsApp where we get feedbacks. Or it could be whenever a system is initiating a function, right? An actor is a system rather than a real person. Message queues are a typical ways of sending the confirmation back, right? And some physical feedbacks, for instance, cases like retail purchase, or somebody's purchasing something in a store, the physical receipts could be the feedback for the customer. And sometimes, rarely, but still sometimes there are physical letters as feedback going back. So now let's look at some key characteristics of the feedback, right? Feedback must be provided to the initiator of the business process, and it has mandatory for every change in status, right, including completions. Whereas it is optional for any change in states in between, right? So it is similar to the events that we defined, right? And feedback must be provided for an actor performing a function also. So on completion, it is mandatory, but in the intermediate steps completion, it could be an optional one, right? Feedbacks always should have an identifier, and that basically that identifier should be can be used to trace back the business process or the function, right? Whichever is initiating the feedback. Where say typically an order confirmation message will have the order number, a ticket confirmation will have the ticket number, right? So it should have an identifier through which the person or the system that consumes that feedback should be able to trace back to the architectural component that initiated that feedback. And feedbacks it's an opportunity, that feedback is an opportunity to communicate other relevant information to the actor, right? So it could be some actions that can be, so if we are expecting some actions from that actor, so it's a good way of letting them know the actor that we are expecting a feedback, accepting an action, right? Now, further going down, what are the relationships that's involved in the business event and feedback, right? We talked about this, most of it, business. So business processes creates business event, business entities create events, business event triggers notification. And the other thing which we haven't covered is business event can belong to categories, right? So business event by itself is not reusable, meaning a business process, a single process a business event can be initiated only by a single process, right? Or by a single entity. It cannot be reused across multiple business processes or entities. So the reusability aspects comes from the event category. So where we can categorize the events, and each business event can belong to multiple categories. For example, a ticket creation event can be categorized as a process initiating event, or a ticket related event, right? So that's how we can bring in that abstraction to the event categorization, not through real reuse across business process or business entities, right? And business processes can create feedback. Similarly, business function also can create feedback, right? With these relationships in place, let's look at the meta models, right? So business event, so business process, business entities can create business event. It's actually business the process instance, which is the instance of business process that creates a business event. Business event can trigger notification, which either is consumed by an actor or can be listened into by a process instance, which can initiate a process or a sub-process. And business event can be categorized as an event category, can belong to multiple categories. Right, and similarly, feedback. Business processes or business function can create the feedback. So it's actually the process instance that would create the feedback, and that feedback will be consumed by an actor. It could be a person who is acting, or it could be a system actor, right? And it could be internal or external actor. And to summarize, what we looked at is we looked at an overview of business event, key characteristics of business event. We looked at overview of feedback and key characteristics of business feedback. We looked at the relationships and finally the meta models, right? So in the next video, we'll look at journey, right? It could be customer journey or a transaction journey. We'll look into the journey aspects that would complete our videos on the business architecture side, and then we'll take to the next topic. Thank you.